Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive. You ready to unpack some more incredible books?
Oh, absolutely. I'm always ready for a deep dive, especially with a book like Where the Crawdads Sing. So much to uncover.
Right. I mean, Where the Crawdads Sing. This book, it just pulls you in and doesn't let go. And today we're going to focus on Kaya and how all the relationships in her life really shape who she becomes and how all of that ties into the mystery at the heart of the story.
Yeah, it's really fascinating how Owens uses all these different relationships to look at these bigger societal issues. It's not just a good story. It makes you think about what it means to be human, you know?
It really does.
Okay.
So, okay, let's paint a picture here. We're in the North Carolina marshes. Kaya's just 10 years old when she's left completely on her own, abandoned by her family, forced to survive in this really harsh and isolated environment. Poverty neglects the shadow of her father's alcoholism power. It's a lot for a young girl to carry.
It really makes you wonder about the lasting impact of an upbringing like that.
Right.
Each family member leaving one by one, Ma first, then the siblings, and finally Pa. It's a series of abandonments that would leave anyone, especially a child, with some deep scars.
It's heartbreaking. You can practically feel Kaya's isolation in those descriptions of the marsh. It becomes her only refuge, her only solace.
And it's not just physical isolation, right? It seeps into every part of her life. It makes her distrustful, makes it almost impossible for her to really connect with anyone. She's always bracing herself for that next abandonment.
But then comes Tate. Right. He's like this breath of fresh air, a kindred spirit who seems to get Kaya on a level no one else ever has.
Tate is crucial, especially during those formative years. They share this deep connection with the marsh, this love for nature, that forms a bond that's really unique.
And their relationship grows in such a beautiful way, starting with those simple exchanges of feathers to him, opening up a whole world of knowledge for her, but teaching her to read. He becomes so much more than a friend. He's her teacher, her confidant. He helps her break free from that isolation in a way.
He empowers her through education. Think about it. Literacy allows Kaya to express herself, to connect with the wider world. It gives her a voice. She's been silenced for so long, and Tate helps her find it.
Absolutely. But then Tate leaves for college. Just gone. No explanation, no promises. How do you think that impacted Kaya? Especially given her history of being abandoned.
It's a devastating blow. It's like a repeat of all those past traumas all over again. It reinforces her fear of letting anyone in. Imagine finally believing in connection, opening yourself up only to be left behind once more. It would confirm all her worst fears about trusting others.
It's a turning point in the story. And it's this yearning for acceptance, this deep need to belong that leads her to chase Andrews. Right? He's the popular local boy, the epitome of everything Kaya thinks she wants. Acceptance, normalcy. A way to finally fit in.
But that desire for validation makes her vulnerable to a whole other kind of danger. The danger of manipulation and abuse.
Let's dig into that a bit. Chase, at first glance, seems like the answer to all Kia's prayers. Charming, good-looking, part of the in crowd. What's the psychology behind her attraction to him?
I think it's a mix of things. Kaya craves what Chase represents: acceptance, social status, a way to escape that Marsh Girl label that the town has put on her. Her isolation makes her more susceptible to his charm, his attention. He represents a world she desperately wants to be a part of.
And initially it seems like that's what she's getting, right? Romantic picnics, dates a glimpse into a life she's never known, but then things take a really dark turn.
Yeah, the novel does a great job of showing that gradual shift from charming boyfriend to this possessive and abusive partner. The possessiveness, the control, the subtle ways Chase isolates her from the few connections she has. It's a classic pattern of abuse.
And it's not this sudden, jarring change. It's subtle. It creeps in slowly. The novel really highlights how abusers use charm and manipulation to gain control. They exploit vulnerabilities, and for Kaya, those vulnerabilities are her past traumas and that deep-seated need for acceptance. She's a prime target.
It's just heartbreaking to see Kaya go through that after everything she's already endured. She's trapped in this toxic relationship.
It really underscores how prevalent these situations are and how crucial it is to recognize the red flags of manipulation and abuse.
Absolutely. But Owens also makes sure to show Kaya's strength and resilience in this situation. She tries to break free from Chase. We see her courage, her determination to escape his grasp.
You're right. Think about Rodney's testimony, right?
Oh, yeah.
About their confrontation.
Yeah.
He talks about Kaya's fierce independence and her refusal to be controlled.
Yeah, that scene is so important. It reveals her inner strength, that fighting spirit she's developed from years of surviving on her own.
But it also begs the question, why didn't she leave sooner? Why stay in such a damaging situation?
That's where the novel's exploration of isolation and societal prejudice really comes into play. Remember, Kaya has always been seen as an outsider, branded as the Marsh Girl, subject to endless rumors and judgments.
The community that should have embraced her, ostracized her instead. It's no wonder that she finds solace in the marsh, the one place that accepts her unconditionally. It becomes her sanctuary, a reflection of her own inner world.
And that's the tragedy of it all, right? Society's rejection pushes her further into isolation and makes her more vulnerable to someone like Case. He offers her that illusion of belonging, even if it comes at a terrible price.
It's a vicious cycle. But there are glimmers of hope, right? People like Jumpin and Mabel who offer Kaya kindness and support, despite hope, right? People like Jumpin.
They represent the possibility of human connection. Even in a world that often seems determined to divide and isolate, their small acts of kindness, a warm meal, a listening ear, they become lifelines for Kaya, reminding her that she's not entirely alone.
It's a reminder that even in the darkest of times, human connection can still thrive.
And speaking of glimmers of hope, we can't forget Tom Milton, the lawyer who defends Kaya when she becomes the prime suspect.
Tom Milton, his closing argument. It's a powerful statement about the responsibility we have towards one another. Makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
About how much responsibility we bear for the circumstances of others.
Absolutely. He's essentially saying we can't just label and ostracize people without acknowledging how our actions or inactions contribute to their situation.
Right. It's a powerful indictment of prejudice and how we often scapegoat those who are different. And it all ties back to this web of relationships, family, romantic, societals, that have shaped Kaya's life.
Exactly. And that's what makes the central mystery of the novel so captivating. It forces us to confront our own assumptions and to consider how these relationships have made Kaya both incredibly resourceful and deeply distrustful, capable of surviving alone, but also vulnerable to manipulation.
It creates this gray area where nothing is as it seems.
And then there's the death of Chase Andrews and how all these complex dynamics come into play during the investigation.
Speaking of the investigation, that shell necklace, right? It's a seemingly small detail, but it becomes a central piece of evidence.
Yeah. Chase's mother insists he always wore it, but it's missing from his body. And we know that Kaya gave Chase a journal decorated with shells, a journal where she documented their relationship, including the details about his controlling behavior and her attempts to leave him.
Classic case of circumstantial evidence, right? The missing necklace, Kaya's knowledge of the marsh, her complicated history with Chase, it all seems to point towards her.
On the surface, absolutely. But the novel is too clever for easy answers. It intentionally blurs the lines between victim and suspect. We're left wondering, are these just coincidences or carefully placed clues? It keeps us guessing.
And remember how the story jumps back and forth between the present-day investigation and Kaya's past. We're piecing together the puzzle right alongside the investigators. It's so effective.
It's essential to understanding what the novel is saying about prejudice and jumping to conclusions. The townspeople are blinded by their preconceived notions about Kaya, the Marsh Girl. They readily assume she's guilty. They fit the pieces together based on their biases, not on the facts.
It shows how much our perceptions shape how we interpret things. And we see this play out so clearly in the courtroom.
Exactly. The prosecution focuses on her isolation, her knowledge of the marsh, her affinity for nature. They paint her as this wild, untamed creature capable of murder.
It's like they're using her connection to nature as evidence against her. The very thing that's given her solace is twisted into a motive.
It's a powerful commentary on how societal biases are used to manipulate narratives. They're ignoring who Kaya really is as a person, the depth and complexity of her character that we as readers have access to.
Which is where Tom Milton, her defense attorney, comes in. He offers this counter-narrative. He urges the jury and us as readers to consider the impact of societal rejection on Kaya's life.
His closing argument is brilliant. He dismantles the prosecution's case by pointing out the hypocrisy of a society that abandons a child and then uses that abandonment as evidence of her guilt.
Yes. He's saying we can't point fingers without acknowledging our own role in creating the conditions that lead to these tragedies.
It's a profound statement about our responsibility to look beyond the surface, to understand the complexities of human experience, and to recognize that judging someone based solely on their circumstances can have devastating consequences.
It makes you wonder if Kaya had been embraced by her community, given the support and understanding she deserved, would things have turned out so tragically?
It's a question the novel wants us to think about. It's about understanding how interconnected our lives are and how our actions or inactions can have a ripple effect shaping the destinies of others.
And then there's that pivotal moment when witnesses come forward, placing Kaya in town the night of Chase's death. It seems like she has an alibi.
Just when you think things might be going in her favor, the prosecution drops their trump card, a shrimper, who claims he saw Kaya's boat heading towards the fire tower that very night.
Talk about a twist.
Yeah.
Is the shrimper mistaken? Is he lying? Or is Kaya really guilty? The suspense is killing me.
And that's where we'll have to leave it for now, but trust me, we'll get to that ending and all its twists and turns in our next segment.
Buckle up, everyone, because this ride is just getting started.
You can say that again.
Stay tuned for part 2 of our deep dive into Where the Crawdads Sing, where we'll unravel that ending and explore the deeper meanings of this captivating novel.
We'll be right back. You know, it's really interesting how the book uses that whole mystery surrounding Chase's death to shine a light on some of those big societal issues we were talking about earlier. The suspicion that falls on Kaya, it just brings all those prejudices and assumptions the townspeople have about her bubbling right to the surface.
Yeah, it's like her whole life, her connection to the marsh, the way she lives, it all becomes evidence against her in their minds. It really shows you how quick people are to jump to conclusions based on what they already think they know, rather than looking at the actual fact.
Right, and it makes you ask the question how much of that evidence against Kaya is really incriminating and how much is just a reflection of the biases the community already has.
It makes you think, doesn't it, about how often we see what we want to see, especially when it confirms what we already believe about someone or something.
Well, like, think about how the prosecution uses Kaya's knowledge of the marsh against her. They try to make her seem like this wild, vengeful spirit who knows all the secrets and dangers of the swamp. Like, she's one with the wilderness, and that makes her dangerous.
It's almost like they're trying to play on this primal fear of the unknown, using the marsh as this symbol of something dark and dangerous.
Exactly. They take her deep connection to nature and twist it, present it as proof that she's capable of violence. But they're totally ignoring the fact that Kaya has always found solace in the natural world. It's a place of beauty for her.
It's like they're taking her very essence and twisting it into something sinister.
And it all feeds into that narrative that already exists around Kaya, the Marsh Girl, the outsider, the one who doesn't belong. It's easier for them to believe she's capable of murder than to actually confront the complexities of her character and how society has treated her.
And that's exactly what Tom Milton, her lawyer, tries to do right. He challenges the jury and us as readers to see past those simplistic labels and really consider how rejection and isolation have impacted Kaya's life.
He doesn't shy away from the harsh realities of her past, but he reframes them. He argues that those experiences haven't turned her into a monster, but have made her resilient and resourceful.
He's saying she's learned to adapt and survive in a world that has constantly pushed her away.
And his closing argument, it's really a masterclass in empathy and understanding. He reminds everyone that judging someone based on their circumstances without truly understanding their story can lead to some serious injustices.
It's a powerful reminder that we need to look beyond the surface and see the person beneath those labels and stereotypes.
Absolutely. And speaking of labels, remember that shell necklace. Such a small detail, but it plays a huge role in the story.
Right. The prosecution tries to use it as this key piece of evidence. They say it belonged to Chase, linking Kaya to the crime scene.
But we know Kaya gave Chase a journal that was decorated with shells, a journal where she wrote about their relationship, about his controlling behavior, about her trying to break free from him.
It's like there's this parallel story unfolding within the main story. The journal becomes a symbol of Kaya's voice, her way of documenting her truth after being silenced and ignored for so long.
And then the necklace goes missing. It makes you wonder, didn't it? Was it planted there? Did someone else take it? Or is it just a red herring, a distraction to throw everyone off?
The ambiguity is definitely intentional. Owens isn't giving us any easy answers. She wants us to grapple with that uncertainty, to question what we think we know, and to entertain the idea that the truth might be far more complicated than it seems.
And that's what makes Where the Crawdads Sing so captivating. It works on all these different levels, weaving together a thrilling mystery with these profound insights about society and what it means to be human.
It's the kind of story that stays with you long after you've finished reading. It makes you think about your own biases and how we as individuals and as a society contribute to both the pain and the healing of others.
And speaking of healing, let's talk about the role of the marsh in Kaya's life. It's so much more than just the setting. It's like a character in itself, a force that shapes her destiny and ultimately helps her find redemption.
Yeah, it's her sanctuary, her teacher, the place where she finds solace and inspiration. The one constant in her life, the one place where she truly feels accepted and understood.
It shows us that sometimes connecting with something larger than ourselves, whether it's nature or art or spirituality or even just a sense of purpose, can give us the strength and resilience to get through even the toughest situations.
It's like the marsh holds this ancient wisdom that Kai is able to tap into, a wisdom that goes beyond human judgment and prejudice.
Exactly. It operates by its own rules, its own rhythms. It's indifferent to human drama, you know? It's a source of both beauty and danger, a place where life and death are constantly intertwined.
And Kaya, because of her deep connection to the marsh, learns to navigate all that complexity. She finds balance in a world that often feels chaotic and unpredictable.
She becomes part of that ecosystem, attuned to its rhythms and secrets, finding strength in its resilience.
It's a beautiful metaphor for how we can find healing and wholeness by connecting with something larger than ourselves, something that reminds us of our place in the grand scheme of things.
And it reminds us that even when things are really rough, even when we feel isolated and alone, there's always strength and connection out there if we're willing to look for it.
That's a really powerful message, especially in a world that can feel so fragmented and disconnected.
Absolutely. Where the Crawdads Sing is a story about finding belonging, about how powerful connection can be, and it's about the importance of understanding and empathy in a world that often seems to prioritize judgment and division.
It speaks to something deep within us, reminding us that even in the darkest of times, there's always hope, always resilience, and always the possibility of finding beauty and connection in the most unexpected places.
It brings us to those final moments of the story, the resolution of the murder mystery, and those lingering questions that Owens leaves us to ponder.
Yeah, let's talk about that not guilty verdict and what it means for Kaya, for the town, and for us as readers.
Okay, so we have this not guilty verdict. It feels like a huge win, right? Like a triumph over the prejudice and assumptions that have followed Kaya her whole life. But is it really that straightforward?
That's the thing about Owens. She doesn't give us easy answers. She wants us to think critically, to question everything.
Right. And then just when you think you have it all figured out, the story jumps years into the future. And we discover that poem, the one that seems to confess to the murder. It's like a punch to the gut. It leaves you reeling, questioning everything.
Did Kaya actually kill Chase? Is that poem a confession? Or is it something completely different? A metaphor, a fantasy, her way of taking back her power after the world tried to silence her over and over again?
It's the kind of question that stays with you. It's what makes the book so good. And I think that's exactly what Owens wants. She wants us to wrestle with those complex questions, to realize that sometimes there are no simple answers.
It makes you think about what truth really is. Is it this fixed, objective thing, or is it something more fluid, something that changes depending on who's telling the story and what their experiences and biases are?
And Kaya's story shows how truth can be so elusive. It can be multifaceted, hidden by prejudice and those stories that society likes to tell. It reminds us to be critical thinkers, to question what we hear, and to consider different points of view before judging.
And it makes you realize that even in a court of law, a place where they're supposed to be looking for justice, the truth can be distorted and manipulated.
Absolutely. Kaya's case is a perfect example of how societal biases can creep into the legal system. They influence everything from how they investigate to how they present evidence to what the final verdict is.
But even with the not guilty verdict, there's still this sense of unease, right? Like you're left wondering if justice was truly served, if the system really recognized Kaya's innocence, or if she just slipped through the cracks somehow, a beneficiary of luck rather than a fair and impartial process.
And that's what's so brilliant about the ending. Owens doesn't give us closure. Instead, she creates a space for us to think, to discuss, to examine what we believe about justice, guilt, and how complex human nature can be.
And it brings us back to Kaya and her resilience. Despite everything she's been through, the abandonment, the isolation, the abuse, the trial, she still finds a way to make a meaningful life for herself.
Her connection with the marsh is a huge part of that. It's where she heals, where she grows. It's a source of strength and inspiration for her.
It's where she learns to adapt, to survive, to find beauty and meaning in a world that's been pretty harsh to her.
And it reminds us that even when life is hard, we can find comfort and connection in nature, in our passions, in our creativity, and simply trying to understand things better.
It's a reminder that we have the power to choose how we see ourselves, to find our own strength, and to make a life worth living, no matter the obstacles.
Where the Crawdads Sing is a testament to that. It's a beautiful and haunting exploration of resilience, adaptation, and ultimately transcendence.
I think that sums it up perfectly. It's a story that challenges us, touches our hearts, and stays with us long after we've finished reading.
It's a story that asks us to look inward, to empathize with others, and to acknowledge how interconnected our lives really are and what impact our choices have on ourselves. And that brings us to the end of our deep dive into Where the Crawdads Sing.
We hope you've gained some new insights into this amazing and thought-provoking novel.
And remember, the journey of exploration doesn't stop here.
There's always more to discover, more to learn, more to question. So keep diving deep, keep seeking understanding, and keep exploring the stories that illuminate what it means to be human. When that not guilty verdict comes in, it's such a powerful moment. It's like this huge wave of relief washes over you. You just feel so happy for Kaya, like she finally escaped this system that seemed determined to punish her for just being different.
It does feel like a win,
Right.
Not just for Kaya, but for anyone who's ever been pushed to the margins, misunderstood, judged for their circumstances rather than who they are.
But it's not a simple victory, is it? Owens doesn't let us off that easily. She throws in that curveball. Years later, we find out about that poem, the one that sounds like she's admitting to killing Chase. It makes you question everything.
It's like she pulls the rug right out from under you. She doesn't tell us what to think. She makes us confront our own interpretations, our own biases, what we believe about justice and truth.
Yeah. Did Kaya actually kill Chase? Is that poem a real confession, or is it something else? A metaphor? A way for her to process her pain, to reclaim her power in a world that's always tried to silence her?
It's a question that sticks with you long after you close the book, and I think that's the whole point. Owens wants us to grapple with those difficult questions, to realize that sometimes there aren't easy answers. Things aren't always black and white.
It makes you think about truth. What is truth, really? Is it this absolute thing, or is it more fluid? Does it change depending on who's telling the story and what they've been through?
Kaya's story shows us how hard it can be to pin down the truth. It can have so many sides. It can be clouded by prejudice and those narratives that society clings to. It reminds us to think critically, to question what we hear, to consider different points of view before we judge.
It also shows how even in a court of law where they're supposed to be searching for the truth, things can get messy. The truth can be twisted and manipulated.
Absolutely. And Kaya's case really highlights how societal biases can work their way into the legal system. They influence every step of the process, from the investigation to the way they present evidence to the verdict itself.
And even though the verdict is not guilty, you're still left with this feeling of unease. Like, did justice really prevail? Did they truly believe Kaya was innocent? Or did she just slip through the cracks somehow?
It's brilliant how Owens does that with the ending. She doesn't wrap everything up in a neat little bow. Instead, she leaves us with the space to think, to discuss, to examine what we believe about justice, about guilt, about how complicated people are.
It keeps the conversation going. And it brings us back to Kaya and her incredible resilience, even after everything she's faced. The abandonment, the isolation, the abuse, the trial, she still finds a way to make a life for herself. A good life.
That connection she has with the marsh, it's such a big part of her healing and growth. It's her refuge, her teacher, her source of strength.
It's where she learns to survive, to adapt, to find beauty and meaning in a world that hasn't always been kind to her.
And it reminds us that even when things are really tough, we can find peace and connection in nature, in things we're passionate about, in our creativity, in simply trying to understand the world around us.
It reminds us that we have the power to define ourselves, to find our own strength, and to make a life worth living no matter what.
Where the Crawdads Sing is a beautiful and powerful story about all of that. It's about resilience, adaptation, and ultimately finding a way to rise above your circumstances.
It's a story that makes you think, makes you feel, and stays with you long after you've finished reading it.
It challenges us to look at our own biases and to recognize the strength of the human spirit. It's a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there's always hope.
Well said. And with that, we come to the end of our deep dive into Where the Crawdads Sing.
We hope you enjoyed exploring this captivating and thought-provoking story with us.
Remember, the journey of exploration and discovery never truly ends. So keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep searching for those stories that shed light on the human experience.
Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll see you next time for another deep dive.